I guess it was last week at this point, AOC did a webinar informing people in her district and broadly of their rights if ICE comes knocking and tries to deport one of their family members or friends. And this caused a mass freakout on right-wing media. It's time, once again, for them to breathe new life into their psychosexual fixation with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And who better to do it than this, I don't know, this Harkonnen over
Obama
here.
appointee?
Yeah, the least articulate thumb in the world, who just basically decided that he wasn't going to leave Midtown Manhattan yesterday, and he went on Newsmax and like 6 different, I'm barely exaggerating, I think it was 4 different Fox News shows to talk about AOC. So here is Homan earlier in the day on with Bill Hemmer, who almost seems exasperated with him. He's the border czar, Homan. Not sure what authority he really has, except to just be a fascist in public for Donald Trump.
Heard you talking about AOC over the weekend. Do you believe she is breaking the law?
I'll leave that up to DOJ. What I find disturbing is that any member of Congress wants to educate people how to evade law enforcement. You can claim you're educating those constitutional rights. Okay, you can keep that claim. What she in fact is doing, telling people don't open your door, hide in your home, don't talk to ICE. We're talking about people who are in the country illegally, committed a crime, they're a public safety threat, they've been convicted of serious crime, and they've been ordered removed by a federal judge. So it's like AOC and others don't want ICE to enforce the laws that they enacted. She's a member of Congress. Let us enforce the laws you enacted. That's what we're supposed to do.
You can't go after her. Do you think others should?
Crazy question.
No, I think I've asked DOJ, where's that line of impediment, of interference? Now, if someone stands in your way, prevents you from arresting somebody, put your hands on it, that's impediment.
What?
But what line is telling people to hide from ICE, not open the door? Where do you cross that line on impediment? So I've simply asked the Department of Justice, give us that line.
You have talked to them about this. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Wow. We'll see where that goes. Tom Homan, I'm out of time.
Wow. So this is him saying essentially that he is directing the Department of Justice to look in one of Donald Trump's political enemies because AOC dared to have a webinar where she just explicitly delineated people's Fourth Amendment rights that prevents unreasonable search and seizure. I want to make sure that I have the exact wording correct. Yes, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So that does require specificity about the warrant. Now, the Supreme Court has eroded this right over and over again, but you can, I mean, as the Trump administration flagrantly violates the law when there are judges telling, say, like Elon Musk, that he has no right to access this Treasury Department's most private information, and they're just doing it anyway. Now Homan is going to go on TV and say that he's directing an investigation by the Justice Department that's now currently extorting the mayor of New York City to enforce their immigration policies and raids. He's saying, well, because this congresswoman from the same city isn't abiding by what we want, well, we'll drop prosecution in one instance because we can force the guy to do what we want. But in the instance where this congresswoman is not abiding by what we want, yeah, we're going to try to prosecute her. That's basically what he's saying. I mean, the administration fully hasn't said it, but he's the border czar. He's a representative of the administration. He was on CNN saying the same thing. Here he is on Newsmax, you know, with his opinions about her intelligence. It's so weird.
This guy?
How this guy
who sounds like a bulldog that's been like inbred for 30 generations trying to breathe. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. This Rhodes Scholar says
he does look like he's wasting away, which is, you know, something we can all celebrate.
Yes. I mean, that would be nice. I would like to see that happen, maybe on air, live. Of course, he's calling her dumb here. That's what you do when you got to put down a strong woman.
Well, first of all, I think she's, you know, I won't go after her on
Tom,
national
please
TV
do.
because,
Please do.
she
Say what's on your
only-
mind. It's a holiday.
Look, she's the dumbest congresswoman ever elected to the Congress, and she proves that every day. And
You're
look,
slurring your
bottom line
words.
is, I can't believe any member of Congress, Republican, Democrat, Independent, would want to educate criminal illegal aliens who are in the country illegally, been convicted of a violent crime, and have been ordered removed by an immigration judge after
sorry,
due
but pause
process.
it. That's always a tell when they have to lean on the been convicted of a violent crime thing, because that's not, we know that that's not who they're going after. They think this Nazi here thinks that being in this country undocumented is the violent crime. It's violence against whiteness.
Right.
And the Fox News, like he says, Hammer said, do you have anybody else going after her? That is a very dangerous thing to say in this country when Congress people have been shot up by the right wing on that. And
Gabby Giffords was shot by a right winger. What was that, 10 years ago?
Exactly. And here's something for all the Nazis who think like this Homan guy has something to say. Undocumented people have rights, you stupid assholes. They have rights.
Yes, they do. And to bolster Matt's, well, let's finish what he has to say, and then I want to bolster Matt's point about who's actually being detained right now by ICE.
Violent crime, and have been ordered removed by an immigration judge after due process at great taxpayer expense. You got a congressman or congresswoman that does not want ICE to do the job that Congress has mandated them to do and funds them to do.
I cannot believe that this person has such little self-awareness that he just called her dumb. I mean, I can barely understand what Humpty Dumpty is saying here, but
Called radical by Mao.
this came out on Friday. This is actually a great. This is some of the folks over on Substack are doing really good work on immigration, because a lot of our mainstream media is not touching this, and they're just regurgitating the criminal talking point that Matt just alluded to. So ICE's, according to Austin Coker on Substack, ICE's latest detention data shows growth of immigrants targeted with no criminal histories, exactly as predicted.
Who could have saw that coming?
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, released new detention data today that objectively confirms widespread reports that ICE's enforcement surge has largely targeted immigrants without criminal convictions or criminal charges, contrary to the Trump administration's baseless public assertions. The data is clear on this point, and then Coker explains. ICE's detention data reflects the total detained population on a single day. It does not reflect the total number of people detained and released, blah, blah, blah. So they're just giving some background about the data. But you can see in this chart here the number of people detained by ICE, and you can see that escalation. As of February 9th, ICE's total detained population reached 41,169. ICE's total detained population is now higher than at any point in the Biden administration. And for the first time since the pandemic, those numbers have crossed 40,000.
It's interesting that CBP's numbers haven't gone up. It seems like ICE is more responsive to the incoming fascists than CBP.
Yes. This growth is due entirely to the people detained by ICE rather than by Customs and Border Patrol protection. So you can see like the border CBP would be at the border. This is basically about the raids.
Right.
The number of people booked in by CBP declined by 2,491, while the number booked in by ICE increased 4,422. It was the largest single bi-weekly increase in people detained by ICE since at early 2021, again in the pandemic. So that clearly indicates to you that despite them talking about their fears at the border, the number of detentions is declining there because they are reallocating their resources to raids of folks and terrorizing people. And then here it is with the criminal history. This is the chart that they tabulated. Immigrants with criminal convictions made up the largest group of people in detention at the start of the Trump administration, in no small part due to the laws around how ICE is required to detain, as well as the priorities of the Biden administration. That was a continuation of the of the Obama policy, which was deportations targeted towards people with criminal histories. That's what the Trump administration is claiming they're doing, but they're lying. The number of those individuals did go up from about 9,300 to about 10,500. The total number of people detained with pending criminal charges also increased. But the largest objective growth in people detained came from immigrants with no other criminal histories. This group increased by almost 2,000 in about 2 weeks. This group also grew proportionally from 6% to 14% of people all detained. And then I just want to get to the chart below, the bar graph. Here it is. Relative growth of detained immigrants by criminal history. Other immigration violators, 3.2 times growth of the others in the Trump administration.
And the convicted criminal thing can only grow so much because that's already been a point of emphasis for over a decade by all administrations.
By both Biden and Obama, and of course Trump. So you can see that the growth of the people who don't have either convictions or pending criminal charges is multiple times more than that of those with records or with convictions. So there you have it, folks.
And so if somebody said, for instance, that his main complaint, sorry to get into this, but there's commentators that I think should issue corrections on some of their statements. Cenk Uygur, January 27, said, the Colombian president started the fight on accepting undocumented immigrants back into his country. His main complaint was that they were coming on a military plane, and that's inhumane treatment. Good news, you can treat them as humanely as you like when you have them back. Did Trump threatening sanctions
Can you
work?
put that up? I want to read this.
Yeah, I'll put this in. I'll put it in Slack right here.
I hadn't seen this, so.
This is the last time I respond to this, which is, I think, a heinous tweet, frankly, disgusting at the time. Did Trump threatening sanctions work to resolve this? Yes, that's a fact. Was there much substance to the original complaint? To be honest, no. I think the real substantive fight is over who to deport. If they're convicted felons, their comfort on the plane is not my top concern. Now, everyone that had been following this knew that, not to grant the premise, that if they're convicted felons, their comfort on the plane is not my top concern. It is insanely discrediting that he even thought to tweet that out, because everyone knows that the rise is going to be in people who aren't. And now we have people like in Costa Rica and all these countries taking people like, say, one story I think we saw in the news back today of a woman who was seen through a window being held at a hotel, and she held up a sign that says Afghanistan, and then she held up her hands to say to make a plane symbol, and then mimicked her head getting cut off, saying that if I get sent back to Afghanistan, I will be killed. That is happening all over because of this, and these people are not criminals.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I hadn't seen this particular tweet. It's hard to see anything on Twitter these days, but so the Colombian president basically had at this time rejected the usage of military planes that the Trump administration was trying to use to deport undocumented people back to Colombia because of the extreme history of U.S. military intervention in Latin America and what that would mean, and the fact that he didn't like that they were being treated as criminals when they were essentially just trying to come to the United States to make a better life for themselves. And the Trump administration, didn't they basically capitulate on that? I forget exactly the details.
They eventually forced them to take the planes because they were much more powerful than Colombia is.
But yeah.
Well, with that too is it's sort of they interpreted that as if it was a victory when really they just kind of did what Petro asked them to do, which is officialize it by have the migrants on the military planes,
right?
And said it was just a victory because they threatened Petro with tariffs. Therefore, he said, okay, do it on the military planes, even though that's what usually how they would get those migrants there in the first place, which is on military planes as opposed to a chartered flight or something like that.
Right. And the second part that Matt read here about the top concern being people's comfort. Why is the top concern them not having comfort? I mean, this is the odd thing, it's
pandering.
Well, no, I mean, actually, I used to be, again, when I got hired there, I was a huge fan of their show for a while. And I remember back in the day, they did a segment about Anders Breivik, the killer in
Norwegian
Norway,
mass shooter?
or stabber, right? Or he killed. It was a
No, Breivik set off a bomb in Oslo, I think, right? Or maybe it was Sorry, I'm getting
I can't remember, but he was a mass killer, horrific human being.
They went up and shot like a young labor sort of camp after he set up a bomb in one of the major cities in
Yeah, it was a bombing and a
Scandinavia.
shooting. Yeah.
And, and I remember he was. They showed basically the conditions of the jail that he is in, where he will be in for the rest of his life. But the court system there, you just have to renew it over and over again. So there's no life sentence, but he will be there for the rest of his life. And the fact that he had a TV and like it looked like a dorm, as they do all across many, prisons in Scandinavia. I remember Cenk was very unhappy with that. So I don't necessarily know if this is pandering. I do think it's just a difference in ideology where I do not believe that carceral punishment is an effective way to make us safer for the most part. If there are dangerous criminals like Breivik, as long as they are kept away from the rest of society so they don't commit mass atrocities, I do not believe that they should be held in inhumane conditions. We know that solitary confinement is regularly used against prisoners like, say, Chelsea Manning or other people who may, God forbid, read a magazine, which literally really drives people insane and has no positive effect on society. That's what our prison system is like. It's a system of abuse as opposed to one that is oriented towards rehabilitation. So my point here is that I don't actually think it's pandering. I do think it's a difference in ideology where one, he's pandering by granting the premise that these are criminals, which we just showed the data that they're obviously not. But it's a difference in between, a more right-wing reactionary viewpoint, which is what that show is now, and one that's based in humanism and about creating structures that aren't about inflicting pain really on anybody, but about keeping us all safe.
Yeah, because Emma, quick questions. Do you know where MS-13 came from?
It is a gang from...
U.S. prison system.
Oh,
do you know where
okay.
Tren de Aragua came from?
U.S. prison system?
Venezuelan prison system. It turns out that just caging people in mass doesn't actually solve the problems that some of the same people like to think are the most important and urgently addressed. It turns out that prison might actually be a networking opportunity for criminals.
Yes, I think that's kind of well established, but people pretend not to care because they like the punishment aspect.
Exactly. And also there's, an
sick.
audience ready for sort of pro-mass crime stuff, which we've witnessed even before in so-called independent media, investor-taken media, and the mass media. They love to lead with these sorts of stories.
Well, let's take a call, and then I wanted to do this federal worker story, which is really important, but I've had some folks on the line for a second. Calling from a 585 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
This is you.
Hi, this is Brandon from Rochester. I called in before, I think, and at the time you suggested, or I wanted to debate Sam before, and you said you could take down my number to greenlight that. I'd probably call back in later the week if you're still open for that.
He's not here this whole week, but you can call in next week if you want to debate him in particular.
Sure. Yeah, I'll probably do that.
All right.
Sure. And besides that, the only thing that I knew that I don't know if you guys heard, I don't think I heard you read him today, but ExpressVPN is unfortunately owned by Cape Technologies, which is a technology firm owned by Teddy Sagi, who's an Israeli billionaire who made most of his money by founding a gambling software support company. So,
okay.
Unfortunately, he owns shit tons of stuff. I didn't know it, but my VPN, who's a different provider, which I thought was decent, is also owned by him. So he owns loads of shit.
Okay, well, we're writing that down now, and we'll make sure to flag it. Thanks for letting us know.
Yep, cool.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, generally when it comes to that stuff, it's less about the nationality of the people than if they're on explicitly the BDS boycott list.
Yeah. To be honest, that's kind of the guide that we use, but this is a little above my pay grade, but we did write it down.
Or if they're, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure actually the West Bank making company, the West Bank linen company was actually on the BDS list.
Yes, that's why we said no to them. Ryan and Callie, Anders Breivik's cell is better than my apartment, but as long as he's unable to murder her children, I'm okay with that. Right, exactly. Dave from Jamaica, I'll be honest, Jank, like a lot of people, confuses toughness with effectiveness. Portland Pete, also someone being a convicted felon doesn't mean it's okay to treat them poorly. Democrats get way too excited about making bad people suffer. It's wrong.
Oh yeah, remember how people thought the calling Trump a convicted felon thing was going to work? Did that work?
Yeah, it didn't work great.
Didn't do nothing.
Jerry at the beach, this Tom Homan guy looked like he shit on the television today, slurring his words, bald head, looking extremely thumb-like, very, very disrespectful. Company Townie, it's wild to call AOC the dumbest person in Congress when Boebert and MTG exist. Yeah.
Looks like Droopy Dog.
He does. He does look like that. Teacher Dan 20, my grandfather had a cleft palate in his face. His upper lip looked a lot like that, even worse, and his voice sounded a little like that, even worse. I have no doubt this guy is an asshole, but don't pick on the way he talks.
Homan have a cleft palate? I don't notice that.
Beg to differ. Yeah. I'm sorry. This was the same thing. Like RFK, I understand. Junior, I know he has an affliction, but you cross a certain level of being a bad person, I'm going to make fun of you about everything.
Yeah.
Sorry. Obvious books. Obama was the first to appoint Tom Homan and even awarded him a citation. I remember. Yeah. Al Sonic from Pittsburgh. I want to warn that Zuckerberg may run for president. He explored this in 2017. He went to a farm in Iowa. He's obsessed with the Roman Emperor Augustus. Is that why he had that haircut before? He's truly scary. A friend of his has stated he wants to be an emperor of the world. I guarantee he gets divorced and runs as a Republican. He definitely seems like he's getting divorced, but he's like arguably more uncharismatic than Elon Musk.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Yeah, Zuckerberg is not going to be be the nominee for president. DSA Aaron in Atlanta, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are even better than AOC, but they are more brown, so it could never happen. Well, also, Rashida Tlaib could run, but Ilhan Omar was not born in the United States, so she can't run for president.
Indiana voted for Barack Obama. Like, I think people need to stop overemphasizing things like women can't win or brown people can't win in this country. I think it's somewhat self-defeating.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say women can't win, but I would say that I think it's important to recognize how more limited many women in a traditional political context may feel expressing themselves, and how there may be reflexive reactions to them that are still deeply ingrained. I mean, as Sam says, when he was a kid, his mom couldn't get a credit card in his name. It's not a shock that there are some people who can't reflexively see a woman in an authority position, but it does, I think, depend on the campaign. Like, if AOC were to run on a campaign that will change people's lives, she's going to face an incredible amount of sexism, as she does, as we just played with Tom Homan. But can that transcend that? I mean, that is an open question to me.
I think in order to be a first, you need to actually have some offering people something. I think Obama offered something. I think the two women who have been at the top of the ticket were maybe two of the worst politicians in my lifetime, and they shouldn't have been. And it was a failing of the party to elevate them into.
But Biden was a horrible politician, and he beat Donald Trump.
But Biden was running on stuff. Biden ran on a public option. Like,
he said he would veto Medicare for all.
That's true, but he ran on a public option.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Build Back Better, $1 trillion thing, PRO Act, like all this stuff was de-emphasized. And also, I think.
But the nature of the attack is so different. Like, I mean, Biden gets this inherent baked-in credibility when I don't know if Hillary Clinton's campaign was that dissimilar from his. I mean, Kamala's was more conservative. I would agree with that. But she incorporated some of Sanders's policies into her platform, and like
Clinton ran saying, "Don't look into my speeches to Goldman Sachs." Like, I think she couldn't have been worse for that moment.
Biden ran and said, "What, like with the immigration stuff? Go to Trump, he'll deport you." Like, we could come up with a million different examples, but I just think it. Our audience is 82% male, right? I just saw this statistic the other day. if you're a woman watching the show, right, I think that there's probably, some that you probably understand a little bit about how you have to essentially tailor your speech to fit into certain boxes. It may not necessarily be the case, but that is how American politics functions, in that you can't be too aggressive or you're seen as a bitch. You can't be too emotional or you're seen as unfit to lead. And there's very little room to navigate in the middle of that. And I think both Harris and Clinton were hampered by it. But Hillary had more baggage, and Kamala's campaign was more uninspired. I don't know.
I think that's, again, like, I think you do need to be, in order to be a first and break one of these barriers, you do need to be an exemplary candidate. But I also, like, can't help on this topic remembering that Bernie Sanders was smeared in 2020 as a sexist for allegedly having a similar sort of concern. That, I will say, you can go back, I thought was overblown if that was sincere concern of his at the time. But look, I agree that we should be able to have these conversations, but I think the way that they're deployed is dangerous, because it wasn't, we need to take this seriously when Bernie was supposedly saying it to Elizabeth Warren, it was, look at that sexist. But the
way that it's deployed on the internet is different than how normal people are engaging with it, which I think,
I mean by the party, though.
Well, the party, they're going to use it all as an excuse. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't, at the same time, talk about the, like, undergirding reactionary moment of, like, sexism and misogyny that we're in right now, which I do think is informing a lot of the politics, as it did with the rise of the Nazis, when it was a third of the population was unemployed, and Hitler and the Nazis talked about this renewed sense of masculinity, which gave these men purpose, and then also gave them benefits to keep the women in the home so they could produce Aryan children. This is not a new thing. And in a country like ours, when we see women leaders across the West get elected, with Scheinbaum being a notable exception, they're either conservatives or they're centrists. What's the leftist female leader in the West that has gotten elected under a patriarchal, like, Christian society? I mean, it's very rare. We have such a dearth of female senators too. So there is, and I can say from personal experience, a harder time sometimes getting your perspective taken seriously as a woman, where it's seen as, like, when they would say about Kamala, she has no details. I mean, she didn't have a vision, but she had way more details than Donald Trump. Trump came out there and said they're eating cats and dogs. And I just want to make sure that, and with the Bernie thing, Bernie, of course, wasn't a sexist, but there was sometimes, like, there's a style, there's a militancy and an uncompromising nature, which is a good thing in any leftist political movement, but that can sometimes feel a little bit like women don't understand necessarily what their place is in that movement. And I'm still struggling to try to find a way to, like, I don't know, make that a part of my coverage in a way that also doesn't validate the bad faith concerns that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, does this impact your AOC 2028 stuff? Because it doesn't for me. If she wins the primary, I'm willing to go to bat for that.
I think she could win based on what we're saying, because she could have an agenda that's transformative, and then, the issues that we're talking about matter less. But I also, I don't want to belittle it, because I do think it's a real thing, and, particularly reflective of, like, I don't know, some things that I think the left could work on, being more inclusive in that way. Dave from Upstate says, Emma, did you ever consider you lack a mission? I did not consider that. DSA Aaron in Atlanta said there were Bernie bros that were sexist, but Bernie wasn't. Exactly right. I mean, but there were going to be sexists in all, like, Biden was sexist and racist in the way that he put Kamala in the corner and didn't actually groom her to be his successor. He used her as a prop and then moved on with his life. These are just very insidious things that are, it's, as Sam would say, it's harder sometimes to identify misogyny than it is racism.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.